Welcome in to the latest edition of College Football Smothered and Covered. My name's Barrett Salih. Appreciate you checking out the show. We have a big show today. We're going to talk about Big Ten. We're going to talk about ACC. Big Ten order of finish. A team making a big splash in Indianapolis this week for Big Ten Media Days. And, of course, a very special announcement that one of my good friends, a guest on the show you've seen many times, made over the course of the last 24 hours. We'll talk about that, as well as where the ACC goes from here, because the real question is, you don't know. You don't know. The show brought to you by BetOnline, your number one source for all things sports this season. Baseball, F1, they've got everything. Live lines, odds, matchup, news, everything over there when the game's over. Go play some poker. Go play, some blackjack. 150 slots available from BetOnline. Just use promo code BELIEVE, B-L-E-A-V. That's promo code BELIEVE, B-L-E-A-V. And you'll get 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. And, of course, if this is your first time checking the show out, appreciate you guys checking the show out. We are, 6 months into the revamped edition of this show. Of course, it was SEC Smothered and Covered from 2016 to 2018. It had to be shut down for reasons I'm still disappointed about. And if you watched my interview with Brian Haydad from Media Days last week, you know that both of us are still owed a lot. But we're back to national, and a lot of very, very big news coming on this show over the course of the next month and change leading up to the start of the season. It is Big Ten Media Days in Indy, and for those who didn't know, there's no media predicted order of finish like you see at SEC and AAC and all these others. The media doesn't get a ballot except for Cleveland.com. And so Cleveland.com is the prediction of note for the Big Ten. That did come out yesterday, I guess it was. And no real challenge, no surprise at the top. Ohio State, Oregon, 1 and 2. I think you could go either way. Ohio State, Oregon, 1 or 2, 2 or 1. You can make a case for either one of those teams. So not much of a surprise there. Penn State and Michigan right behind those two. And look, I think the gap between Oregon/Ohio State and then Penn State, Michigan is massive. And the odds out in Las Vegas and on BetOnline, they reflect that. It's a tier system in the Big Ten. Now, I would be much more surprised if Penn State won the Big Ten than Michigan, even though I fully understand why Michigan is at 4, because I think Michigan's upside is apparent, right? We know what the talent level is. Yeah, they had all the coaching changes and personnel changes and all that other stuff, but if things are right and the way they've recruited, Michigan can be a top-tier team. Of course, it depends on the quarterback position and Orgy and all those other guys, but the ceiling is higher than Penn State. To me, Penn State's ceiling is 3rd in the Big Ten. And honestly, with Drew Aller, you can't have it much higher. He does not complete downfield passes, period. Lost one of his best receivers. They can run the dang football. There's no doubt. And they can play enough defense to at least be competitive. But is the upside anywhere close to Ohio State and Oregon? Meaning, can they be national champions? The answer is no. Penn State is not that talented. They're not that well coached, and they don't have the quarterback to lead themselves into national championship contention. Michigan does. Michigan does. But you have to see it first. You have to see it first. So I'm not surprised that Penn State is ahead of Michigan right now. But these are predicted order of finish ballots. I wonder, those people who had Penn State and Michigan, all the people at Cleveland.com who voted on this, how much of a thought there was to flipping those two around. Because I probably would have Michigan above Penn State on my ballot in terms of predicted order of finish. Power rankings right now, fully on board with Michigan being 4th behind Penn State. We don't even know what their power is. right? We know they can run the football, but we don't know who's handing it off to them. We don't know necessarily who's playing defense. Like there's a question offensively. Defensively, they have two of the best defensive players in the country. Two of the best players in the country are on Michigan's defense. And so that's why I think for me, the upside's higher. Now, USC fans, I know y'all want to be relevant in the Big Ten. I know you want to be relevant in the Big Ten. I get it. You're sixth in the predicted order of finish behind Iowa. Sixth. And like we said earlier, the gap from 1-2 to 3-4 and then down to 5 and everybody else in the Big Ten is massive. Those 4 teams, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, and Michigan, and then bam, something the size of the Grand freaking Canyon down to what clearly Cleveland.com thinks is the 5th best team, and it's Iowa. It's not even USC. And being picked 6th in the Big Ten is, I think, an indictment of Lincoln Riley, but also a sign that people who follow the Big Ten recognize that USC is not ready for what they're getting into. Not ready at all. Look, Miller Moss might be a good quarterback. I get it. They've got plenty of receivers outside. They don't tackle. And that is a philosophical issue with USC. They don't even practice it. They are so fundamentally unsound on defense that even the worst offenses in the Big Ten, talking about Iowa, whoever else, Purdue, whoever else, doesn't matter, Indiana, they're going to be able to score some points. They're going to be able to get some yards on USC. And so I don't care if this offense was led by suddenly the return of Caleb Williams. He gives back that money. He's like, you know what? We're going to break the rules. We're going to go back from the NFL back to college, back to USC. I don't care if it's Caleb Williams running the offense. These Big Ten teams are still better than USC. They would still score points on USC, and they would still put USC back in its place, which is a middle-tier program in the Big Ten. That's what USC is, a middle-tier program in the Big Ten. And why is that? It's because of Lincoln Riley. I know there's still some people that are all aboard the Lincoln Riley train or just haven't jumped off yet. My question is why? We've seen Lincoln at Oklahoma, doesn't care about defense. We've seen Lincoln at USC, doesn't care about defense. I know they've made changes. The Anton Lynn is in there. But if a head coach consistently neglects one side of the ball, I don't care who he hires to run a defense, it's still a top-down philosophy. Until that changes, USC has absolutely no shot of winning the Big Ten. Speaking of Big Ten, my buddy Trey Wallace over at Outkick. Tony Petitti is comfortable with the current Big Ten roster, but we all know that could change down the road, and probably will. See, this is what makes the next 10 years, 5 to 10 years, so interesting. A lot of these conferences, Big Ten included, have shortened up their media rights deals because they don't want to be the ACC, obviously. So every time this rolls up, every time a new deal starts to be in the works, they're going to reassess where they are. What does this mean? What is Trey suggesting here? There are not many teams at all that could be added to the Big Ten and be sold to presidents and ADs currently in the conference as a value add. They don't exist. So I think if the Big Ten were to expand, it would have to lean more towards name value or something other than money to be the selling point. Well, what is that? It's probably geography. Because the Big Ten has made it abundantly clear that it doesn't care about geography. Same thing with the ACC by adding Stanford, Cal, and SMU. The SEC, it still matters to an extent. But my contention is this, and we said this on yesterday's show. Florida State and Clemson don't bring enough money to the SEC. The SEC still cares about its region, its footprint. So I'd be floored if the SEC adds Clemson, Florida State, or anybody else from the ACC. The Big Ten is different. Is it worth becoming a four corners conference for the Big Ten, even if some of your teams have to take a pay cut? Because neither Florida State nor Clemson nor North Carolina, doesn't matter, bring $65, $70 million in value. They just don't. Nobody does, except Notre Dame. But if the Big Ten can say, hey, look, Pacific Northwest, Southern California, Midwest, all across the Northeast, and now down to the Southeast, that would be the epitome, the definition of a super league. We can call the SEC a super league now. Maybe. It depends on how you define it. You will not be able to deny that the Big Ten is a super league if it hits every corner of the United States and the Midwest and the Central Plains. So that's what could happen to the Big Ten. The only other reason to add anybody would be Notre Dame. And how would Notre Dame be available? If the ACC collapses, that's one. Or it convinces Notre Dame that it can suffer a short-term loss in terms of getting out of the ACC contract for a long-term game. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the ACC having right of first refusal for Notre Dame. Reportedly, that's the case. Unfortunately, the ACC contract lives in a skiff in Charlotte, so nobody can see it. But contracts are made to be broken, especially in this day and age when billable hours are always undefeated. So other than that, those two scenarios, I don't see why the Big Ten would add. And that's kind of where I think Petitti and maybe some other commissioners are sort of hesitant to say anything because the market is so different right now than it was 10 years ago, and we have no clue what it'll look like in 3 years, 4 years. And going back to Trey's tweet, part of Trey's article, you can read it on Outkick. The kickoff Big Ten Media Days, the Oregon Ducks made a massive splash in Indianapolis. Splash, Ducks, puddles. Take a look at this. I love that. I love that. They should do that wherever they go. They should bring a 50-foot inflatable puddles wherever they go. And look, it's Oregon. You're Oregon. You're accustomed to doing stuff that's a little bit out of the ordinary, stuff that's a little bit over the top. Do it. Bring that inflatable Oregon Duck puddles to every single away game. Every single one. Doesn't matter if you have permission or not. Just do it. Ask for forgiveness, not permission. This is what Oregon does. This is why they're important to the Big Ten. How many teams in the Big Ten would ever do something like that? Traditional Big Ten teams. None. Zero. The only one that I would even consider, and it would only be for a second, would be Minnesota and a Gopher with PJ Fleck. That's the only one I would even consider. And still, that's a little bit ridiculous. Oregon can change the face of the Big Ten and it can make the Big Ten fun again for the first time. And bringing a giant inflatable duck to Indianapolis is more proof that I'm right. All right, let's talk a little ACC. The most important thing to come out of ACC Media Days is my good friend, my radio partner on SiriusXM, a guest on this show multiple times, Tom Luginbill. Look at that pretty face in the middle of that picture between Dana and Wes. Luke's looking sharp in that purple suit, very purple suit. Handsome tie, good-looking tie. Tom Luginbill is now the official color commentator with Wes Durham in the booth of ACC PrimeTime football. That's my dude. That's my dude. And for you, the listener, what does it mean? For you, the listener, that means you get killer content every Sunday morning on SiriusXM between 9 and noon Eastern time. Why? Because a tired, a hungover, and a delirious Tom Luginbill is the best Tom Luginbill. The best. When he's off of 4 hours of sleep and I'm off of 4 hours of sleep, that means we have really dumb, really funny, really irrelevant arguments that make for good radio. So congrats to my dude. Look at him there. Fancy suit. You should see what I see on Zoom on Sunday mornings on SiriusXM. He doesn't look anything like that. Let me tell you. Speaking of ACC Media Days, ACC boss to fight Clemson FSU lawsuits for as long as it takes. No, that's not true. In reality, he said it. Bill said it. I get it. You have to put on a happy face. You have to put on a strong, unified front until you can't. That sounds a little bit like something what's going on in politics right now. But I digress. Sidebar. What do we always say on this show? Billable hours, they are undefeated. Undefeated. For as long as it takes is in this headline in single quotes. For as long as it takes. Does that mean until the ACC wins? Ladies and gentlemen, no, it does not mean that. It does not mean until the ACC wins. It means until the ACC is sick and tired of paying legal bills when it knows its options are limited. So what does that mean? The ACC contract runs out in 2026. The Big 12 and the Big 10 are roughly around 2030. Almost sounds like as long as it takes means only like 2 or 3 years. And the quote came out yesterday that Florida State and Clemson are not leaving after this season. Well, yeah, of course they're not leaving after this season. Beyond that, willing to bet it's not too far after that, because the ACC is going to fight as long as it takes until it knows that it only takes a few years for those billable hours to rack up. I admire the confidence, though. I admire the confidence. And look at that headline. There's a lot going on there. ACC boss to fight Clemson and Florida State lawsuits for as long as it takes. Well, guess what? There will be other schools joining those lawsuits, or at least filing their own. Don't believe me? Give it a couple months. Give it a couple months. I would be willing to bet that there might be some schools that are maybe a little northeast, one state northeast of Clemson, that might be interested in doing something of their own. There also might be one down in South Florida. Just saying. The ACC, I admire the confidence, but it ain't going to happen. Last thing before we wrap up on this show. seems like forever ago that we were talking about Connor Stalions. I remember actually, I was at my daughter's 8U Cobb County softball tournament, 3-day event, when the Connor Stalions thing was in the midst. One of our teammates' dads was a Michigan fan. We sat there for hours and hours and hours talking about Connor Stalions. His name's Joel. I bet you he's going to watch this. August 27th, Netflix will release Sign Stealer, part of the Untold documentary series on Connor Stalions and the Michigan Advanced Scouting Scandal. Oh, hell yes. Let's freaking go. Let's bring back all this stuff right before the football season, because Michigan's already got the trophy. They can look up and say, scoreboard. They can look over and say, you see that trophy case over there? It contains that big trophy that looks like a lipstick can, bottle, whatever it is. And there's going to be stuff that Michigan fans get pissed about in there. Michigan fans will defend their program to no end with arguments that are ridiculous. Like, well, everybody steals signs. Yes, everybody does steal signs. Not like this. Not like this. And we're going to find out all about it. I wonder if Stalions is going to talk about Jim Harbaugh, because it felt like Michigan did jettison Connor Stalions. Like he was persona non grata, right? But he was constantly next to assistant coaches. He was constantly next to Jim Harbaugh, talking to them. I wonder if you're going to hear him spill the beans, or at least some of the beans, because I would love to know what happens. Jim's not there anymore. He's never going back to college football. Connor doesn't care. Go scorched earth. Do it. I doubt we see that in this, but it'd be cool if he did. Now, one thing that I would love to hear him address is the Central Michigan thing. Was he on the sidelines with a pass? Was that week 1 or week 2? That would be so fascinating to not only hear him admit it, but hear him tell how the process evolved for him to be in that position. That would be awesome. I cannot wait to watch this. I haven't been this excited about a streaming documentary since Last Chance U. The first 2 seasons of Last Chance U, when they're at East Mississippi. The rest of them suck. But this is going to be fascinating. Can't wait. Thanks for watching. Of course, this show brought to you by Bet Online, your number one source for all things sports, live lines, odds, news, all of that. You can get that this summer. Use promo code BLEAV, BLEAV. You'll get 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit up to $250. That's, of course, using promo code BLEAV, BLEAV. Bet Online, the game starts here. Full disclosure, there will not be shows starting Friday until the following Friday. We'll be in another country, in the sun, in the beautiful sand, somewhere in Mexico. I can tell you where, but it's a popular place. If you see me, track me down. But we'll be back tomorrow. Until then, have a great afternoon, evening, and morning.